welcome back.
All right, let's get into the biggest headline this week. Joe Biden has chosen his running mate.
Senator Kamala, that's how you say it, Harris is Joe Biden's VP choice. Not surprising at all. She's half Jamaican, half Indian, and all-American.
And the mudslinging between the Biden and the Trump campaign has already begun. Are you ready for another campaign?
None of us are, Julia. On the left, some aren't happy because of Kamala's record as a prosecutor. On the right, of course, they don't like her to begin with.
Yep. See, 538, which is the top polling website in America, claims that Joe Biden has a 72% chance of winning the presidency as of right now.
Yeah, and of course, they claim the two swing states to watch are Florida, my home state, which I love and talk about all the time on this show, and Pennsylvania. But of course, don't count Trump out. Remember what happened last time, Julia?
I remember that day in 2016.
Everyone does.
Like yesterday. The worst polling failure in a generation? Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, the founder of 538, which you just saw right there, predicted that Trump had an 18% chance back then, and everyone gave him a hard time. And then, voila, it turned out Trump won.
So anything can happen, and I believe both campaigns, they know this fact well.
Yeah, so right now, if the election were held today, there's basically a 3 out of 4 chance that Joe Biden would win, but remember what happened last time, folks.
November 3rd.
Oh, yeah, and
All
that's
right,
a long
David,
way away.
Enough with politics. I want to talk about college football, okay? The pandemic strikes again, and some teams have canceled their fall seasons.
In fact, the NCAA is a little light on the details as to why they canceled, and of course, we're all very bored and very disappointed.
Yeah, with nothing to watch, practically nothing.
I mean, this is a disaster. There's basically no music, no TV, no
nothing.
sports.
I'm on ESPN, and they're rerunning
Although
the
our
games.
producer reminded me that, we have the NBA bubble going and other several sports going on right now.
Bright spots. So speaking of boredom, I don't know if you remember the 90s, because I was in elementary school, I was going into middle school, and
I was
that
too.
was, a time, no pandemics, right? No recessions, no politics that people around me cared about. It was
I don't know whether my teachers were Democrats or Republicans. We didn't talk about that back then. The 90s were just about, boy bands and,
Britney Spears.
and Bill Clinton and occasionally, but we didn't even talk about that.
No, nothing.
I mean, that was like 10% of our energy. These days, it's like 50%. So anyway, if you want to get into a time machine and go back to the fonder days of yesteryear, there's a Blockbuster for rent on Airbnb.
And you can stay there overnight. That's the best part. It's the last Blockbuster on Earth, and no Blockbuster card is needed. The best part is you can Netflix in an old Blockbuster during your stay.
Yeah, for $4 a night. That's crazy. And Julia, did you know this? That Blockbuster actually had the chance to buy Netflix and passed.
I remember that. And I, in all fairness, I feel if we were to go back to that year, if Blockbuster were to go back to that year, maybe they would make the same choice, because back then Netflix wasn't the Netflix that it is right now. So hindsight is always 2020.
Whatever. Still seems super dumb to me. And speaking of hindsight and foresight, TikTok. It's where young people live on social media these days. And here to talk about the growing and controversial platform is the CEO of Movers and Shakers, Evan Horowitz. How you doing, Evan?
Hey, Evan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, see, most people think TikTok is just for the really young folks. Is that true?
Well, that was true in 2019. The young folks were the first to adopt the platform, and by the end of 2019, pretty much all of Gen Z was really engrossed in TikTok. But it's changed a lot since quarantine, actually. So ever since the shutdown, so many older people have been discovering the platform, and now it's aged up extremely quickly, faster than any platform in history.
So what is TikTok for those of us who don't even know what it is? Explain it to us.
Sure, yeah. Well, for those of you who haven't quite yet downloaded the app, it's a social media app. So in the vein of Facebook or YouTube, closer to YouTube though, because it's all about video. So it's always sound on, short form video. People are extremely creative in making fun stories, telling trendy stories, and it's quite addictive, I will say.
Yeah.
So give us 3 tips on posting. Julia wants to know. 3 tips on posting, right?
Julia, are you starting your account?
Yeah, well, I'm not super active. I'm more like an Instagram gal, and I go on Twitter once in a while, but I would like to know, because, half of my viewers are Gen Z.
Yeah, well, the Gen Z is on TikTok, but the millennial audience is very strong on TikTok now too, so I bet you'd be surprised. But I would say in terms of posting on TikTok, it's so different from Instagram. And those of you who have spent any amount of time on it, you just feel that right away. The visual aesthetic is different. the way the stories are told is different. Instagram, you might feel like you have to be having a glass of wine on the Amalfi Coast in order to post a picture there. TikTok's the opposite. Most TikToks are filmed in your home, in your bedroom. You don't need to put on filters. It's really a place for raw and authentic storytelling, which I think is part of why it's exploded so much and why it's been so popular, especially with the younger generations.
Yeah, see, Evan, recently Instagram added this feature called the Instagram Reel, right? And so far what I've been seeing is people just throw their TikTok videos on their Instagram.
The evasion of
Reels.
TikTok to other platforms. You see it on Facebook,
happen?
too. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be awkward like that for a while. Remember when Stories came out? It was super awkward. It was just a Snapchat clone, and no one really knew what to make of it. But eventually they got their stride. I think that will happen eventually with Reels, but right now it's still in that very awkward and early stage of its life.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. President Trump has threatened to ban TikTok in the U.S. next month unless they're purchased by a U.S.-based company. Of course, TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which has connections to China. Is it worth our time to build a following on a platform that could end up banned?
I would recommend it. They just announced they have 100 million monthly active users in the U.S., which is just astronomical. It's almost a third of the population. And that's just growing so fast. And personally, I'm not too worried about the future for TikTok. I think their leadership is extremely strong, savvy, they're well-resourced, and I'm quite confident they'll get their way out of this pickle.
So, can you make money on TikTok the same way people did on Instagram and YouTube, Evan?
Absolutely, yeah. Both from a creator perspective, there's a huge community of influencers that is finding a career being a TikTok creator. And for brands, we're a creative agency and we work with tons of major brands who are looking to reach that audience, 100 million monthly active users. There's just been a huge shift in consumers' focus from the traditional social apps like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram onto TikTok. And so our clients want to be talking to their customers where they're spending their time, which right now is increasingly on TikTok.
Okay. Evan, last question before we let you go. I'm not a very good dancer. I'm always pretty shy of
it's in the name of the company, ByteDance.
ByteDance.
Yeah.
What is something that I can post to say today after I get off the show that does not involve dancing, that'll still, be liked by people?
Post the news. I think one of the things that's a misnomer about TikTok is that it's still all about dancing and singing, which was true about a year and a half ago. But it's diversified phenomenally, where now pretty much anything is discussed there, from beauty and lifestyle, car repair tips. So whatever you're into, there's a community there on TikTok that would love to talk about it.
Perfect.
Great. Well, Evan, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Evan. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Have a good one.
Okay, social media is where people live these days. They get their news, they fight about politics, and they're watching this video on a social media network as we speak.
But see, what is appropriate to put on social media, right? How much do we share? How often should we post? And are we spamming our friends and followers by posting every hour?
Julia, this is a touchy topic, and in my experience, new users of social media tend to go nuts at first and share every gory detail about their lives.
Yeah, see, for me, there's sharing, which brings you closer to your followers and friends, and then there's oversharing, right? What is considered oversharing, however, and whether it would seem annoying to people actually depends on how close you are to the person, right? I actually dug through an experiment done by the University of Arizona this week and let's say we're pretty close. We see each other every week, and I start posting what I had for breakfast this morning. Somebody like you would probably get annoyed because you're like, I already know things about your life. Why are you doing these?
I don't care that you had
details,
oatmeal.
right?
Yeah.
However, if it's like an acquaintance I haven't spoken to in 2 years, they would feel neutral about it. So think about who are your audience, who are your, for us viewers and your followers, and share accordingly.
And of course, always assume that everyone is watching because the information that you're sharing will be viewed by everyone, including potential employers.
Yeah, see, study after study have shown that potential employers really don't like it when they see pictures of you holding alcoholic drinks, even though we all like to go to parties, right? You'd like to hold, I like to hold a margarita with an umbrella on it, especially it matches.
Makes for a nice picture.
It's a really nice picture, but it's best to not post them publicly because I think the underlining, implication is employers tend to assume you're not as intelligent if you're drinking, which is not true, but that's the perception, and perception really counts when you're looking for for a job.
And just remember, all eyes are always on you. And if you're saying outrageous things and you're in the limelight, you might want to reconsider. Consider this tweet from Sean King about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. He said he was 99% sure he would never support Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And cue the next one 2 years later. Oh, this is great. They're wonderful. So here's a very public figure, a little bit of a controversial figure, directly contradicting himself on Twitter.
Yeah, so the first tweet was, he wrote that in 2018, but people screenshot people's tweets, right? You can delete it, but it's
forever.
It's forever. It's out there forever. So just assume people are going to see it.
Yeah, great advice, Julia. Next, we have Alia Mohammed. She is the co-founder and CEO of Open Igloo. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Hey, welcome to the show. Look, Open Igloo is, to me, it's a really cool app. It lets you rate landlords in New York City. And we all know landlords can be wonderful or a complete nightmare, right? What would you say to our viewers who tune in from all over the country on the best practice on selecting a good landlord?
Absolutely. I mean, right now there's this asymmetry of information between landlords and tenants, right? So landlords ask you for every single piece of information on your background with little information in return or guarantee of a positive rental experience. So we're really encouraging tenants, not just in New York City, but across the country, to do due diligence about your rental properties, whether it's a quick Google search or looking into city data sources about open violation data, bed bug complaints. But really, Open Igloo is trying to combine the crowdsourced tenant feedback piece with the real-time access to city data.
So let's say I'm renting an apartment, and right now, August, September, that's really when the turnaround occurs, right? What do we need to know? What are a few things that we need to consider when we're renting an apartment?
Well, right now, there's this really interesting situation in big cities in the United States where people have been leaving due to coronavirus. So you have this vacancy happening in cities like New York. So you have time to do your due diligence, to take a breath, to try and negotiate good rental deals, because landlords right now are eager to fill empty apartments, and tenants are really in this position to take their time, do their research, make sure the reputations of the buildings and landlords are in good shape. So one of the things you can look into is, how big a landlord's building portfolio is. Do they manage 2 buildings or do they manage 60 buildings? That's really going to give you insight into how your property manager is going to manage your rental experience.
Yeah, got it. That makes so much sense.
So tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into this line of work, and what has been your journey to get to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my background is in entrepreneurship and venture capital, and sort of living in New York for the past 8 years. As you can imagine, I've gone through this grueling, rental experience. And, when I was looking for my second, third apartment, I started to be that, weird tenant that would hang out and loiter outside buildings, waiting for people to go in and say, hey, do you like living here? Tell me everything, I need to know, give me the scoop. And I just thought, there needs to be an easier way to collect this data, to put it all into one place and really give prospective tenants the answer they're looking for.
Yeah, see, when you build an app that's based on rating, it's really difficult, in my opinion, to get the first rating because, your first tenant would be like, well, why should I do that? And your first landlord would be like, oh, well, nah. So how did you get your first rating when building this app?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that we designed into the app is we are encouraging tenants to leave reviews to get reviews. So if you go into the application right now and you search for your address, we are encouraging tenants to create an account, submit reviews anonymously for past buildings that they've lived in, and in exchange, they get access to that data that we've collected on the building. So it's really this community that we're building where strangers are helping strangers.
Yeah, so the first rating that you got, was it a friend, or was it you went out to the street in New York City and say, do you want to try my app? Did you, how did you start?
Julia, David, all of the above. It was me leaving my tenant reviews. I was harassing my friends. I was talking to people on the street, walking my dog. Literally anybody and everybody that's willing to listen about this, I've asked them and encouraged them to leave a review. So
Being annoying is part of being an entrepreneur, by the way. So hats off to you, and hats off to creating a great app. I'm going to download it, and I'm going to give you a review.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. See, David, I still rent in New York City.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about a touchy topic.
I want to talk, it is very touchy. Like, how much should we spend on rent?
Before rent got crazy in recent years, Julia, the rule was less than 35% of your income, and that's gross, right? Yeah, your top line. Like if you make $50,000 a year, 35% of that. That's become literally impossible in places like New York and San Francisco.
Yep, and some other big cities. And I've heard from friends and, acquaintances that some of them, they spend half of their gross
income. And that's dangerous.
Yeah, that is really dangerous. Maybe you can get away with it if you're living in a big city and you don't have a car.
Which is a massive expense.
You don't have to pay parking, maybe, but I'm not really sure. I don't think that's great.
In fact, people who spend most of their take-home income on housing are called rent burden, and it's really a drag on their quality of life.
Yeah, because if you ask me, when you're looking for a place to live, I think it's really good to make sure you can afford it. Not just this month, but the next 12 months or 24 months.
And money's highly variable these days, folks. If you're working hourly and if, we have another shutdown, you have to consider that, of course. And for those of you who have, remote work options, you might want to consider moving somewhere cheaper if your lease is ending right now. And if your work can be done remotely, why not be open to new places?
Yeah, why not be open to new places? Check the suburbs. Check places that maybe you have
rural areas. Honestly, living in Midtown Manhattan right now, which Julie and I both do, we don't like it right now. I wish I could live in the country.
It's a little crazy.
So please consider that. And remember, it's a lot cheaper. And what is the eventual goal, Julie?
Well, to own a home. To own a home. So eventually you do want to buy. You don't want to pay somebody else's rent and then buy. You want to build up.
But there's a caveat to that, right? That might not be realistic.
Yeah,
right?
at
Buying
where
here
you
in New York is pretty difficult.
Yeah, so, a lot of our guests on our show, they would advise, especially now, look for elsewhere. Look for the suburbs, look for the rural areas, somewhere that is more affordable, because once you buy a house, that is
be open-minded. You might like it. You never know. The world is changing, but there's one constant. Money is still a big issue. Look after your own wallet because no one else will do it for you.
That's right.
So let's talk about student loans.
Yeah, another rather touchy subject, but a lot of our viewers, they carry student loans around, and we have to talk about it.
So here's what you need to know. Federally held student loans are currently in forbearance. That means they're not accruing any interest.
Yeah, and if you have a government-backed student loan, you don't have to pay anything right now, and your balance isn't growing because there's no interest.
This was a major win that was part of Congress's and the Trump administration's push to deliver much needed help to Americans as they weather the pandemic.
Yeah, see, David, this is great. However, I do want to remind everybody, this is temporary.
Yeah, and that's why many of us are still making payments. If we're able to, the amount we're sending in right now goes straight to principal.
Yeah, and that would help you. It depends on what is your principal amount, but down the road, it could end up being thousands of dollars that you're not paying. So that's saving for you.
Yeah, and if you can't pay, get this, folks, don't worry about it. In fact, we're expecting a new announcement from the Trump administration soon about more help for student borrowers.
Yep. And that's the end of our show today. Thank you for all watching.
Yeah, thank you to all of our hardworking staff. And follow Bold TV on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.